Hello everyone, today I want to give you a big summary of everything I've learned. Everything I had to do to buy my land, to get my building permit and to get my loan from the bank. You'll see that these three administrative tasks are often very connected. One doesn't go without the other. That's why I combined these three topics in one video. And really, I tried to make the most complete summary possible to help you survive the administrative hell that awaits you. So, I hope you will like it. Don't forget to watch it until the end so you don't miss any information. And of course, you have the comment section that will complete everything we're going to talk about today. Alright, enjoy the video. Hi, I'm Julian and this is my house, Container. I'm 26, know nothing about do-it-yourself, but challenge myself to build an affordable, eco-friendly house. I'm working to build resilience and live in harmony with nature. I'm filming all of this, I'm putting it on this channel, so subscribe if you want to follow the adventure. Before we get to the main point, I want to stress that watching the budget is crucial when building a house. To try to save money wherever possible, but without cutting corners on the quality of tools and materials. The first step in this long administrative process will be to find the land. I'm not going to go into the details of how to find the ideal land for you. That might be the topic of a future video. Here, what I'd rather do is give you some advice to start your search. You can browse listings on real estate agency websites, LibonCoin, or lesser known sites. You can walk around and find a piece of land that interests you. Go to the town hall and ask for the land registry. That will allow you to find out who owns that piece of land. Contact them to make an offer. Offer and buy their land directly. I was lucky to find my land on LibonCoin, but many others use the land registry at the town hall. It allows you to find land that isn't listed for sale. So there's no competition to buy it, and you can offer your own price to the owners. It can be profitable, but you must also be ready for frequent rejection. Second tip when you're looking for land, check whether it's serviced or not. A serviced plot is land that already has access to electricity, running water, and sewage disposal. For example, the land I found wasn't serviced. So I had to go through the process to get connected to the water supply and pay 2,000 euros. Connecting to electricity through Enedis cost me 1,250 euros. And for wastewater disposal, you have two options. Either you have a main sewer connection. In that case, connecting to the sewers costs about 2,000 euros in work and taxes. Or you might not have a main sewer connection, like I did. In that case, you'll need an individual sanitation system, like a septic tank. And in that case, the work will cost around 9,000 euros. Unserviced plots are often cheaper than serviced plots. That seems logical, but you'll need to do some work. So it's up to you to calculate if it's worth it or not. You'll see. I'll explain why right away. But in my opinion, undeveloped land is much more profitable than developed land. When you build a house, you will inevitably have to pay the municipal development tax and the departmental development tax. These taxes are 1 to 5% of the land price, so higher priced land means higher taxes. It makes sense, but it ends up favoring cheaper, undeveloped land and lowest taxes. What you also need to pay attention to is to look for towns and municipalities with the lowest development tax rates. A town hall with a 5% rate means you'll pay much more in taxes than one with a 1% rate. So the price of the land will not be the same at all. All of that needs to be taken into account. When you have found your land, you will have to go to the notary with the owner to sign a preliminary sales agreement. At this preliminary sales agreement, the notary will take 8% of the price of the land to pay fees, taxes, and buy a Ferrari. Once again, this favors undeveloped land. Since they're cheaper, notary fees will also be lower. So you benefit once again. The preliminary contract is signed by the owner and buyer under a notary's supervision. It lets you reserve the land for 6 or 7 months, the time needed to get the building permit and also to get the loan from the bank. There is a suspension clause in this agreement, which means that if you don't get the permit or if you don't get the loan from the bank, land purchase cancelled, no fees. It's a measure that allows you to protect yourself as a buyer, and it also protects the seller. In summary, in my opinion, the best deal is to find an undeveloped plot of land to reduce agency fees, notary fees, and taxes. And two, to find this land in a municipality with a low development tax rate. You have your land, you've signed the preliminary contract, and now you have 6 months to obtain the building permit. In this video, I'm not going to go over all the documents needed for the building permit, but I've done even better. I've put the Centre d'enregistrement et de révision des formulaires administratifs building permit application form in the description of the video. Now you have everything you need. That's the end of the video. Basically, it's mostly plans of the outside of your house and the layout on the land. The goal of the City Hall is really to know what it's going to look like from the outside. They don't care. Whether you build a house out of containers, concrete, straw, earth with an open kitchen, eco-friendly or not, all they care about is if it looks good with the other houses. It makes sense since they're not coming into your house, they just care that it doesn't look ugly from outside. I'm telling you because it's important. You instantly see why my container house project got accepted. Because, as you can see in the images that Theo is editing in, my container house looks like a wooden cabin from the outside. So it works. City Hall doesn't care if it's concrete, wood, or a container. As long as it looks like a normal house outside, it's fine. Be careful, as city halls may have a local urban planning plan. It's a document that sets the rules for what you are allowed or not allowed to do in a town. For example, you might be prohibited from installing wooden siding or required to use white plaster with blue shutters. These are rules that help harmonize the appearance of homes in the town. So, make sure to check with your town hall about your local zoning plan, if there is one, before submitting your building permit application. It would be a shame to do things that are directly prohibited. In small towns, there is usually either a shared zoning plan with other towns or none at all. In that case, the National Urban Planning Regulation or National Urban Planning Regulation applies using general national rules without many specific details to know. Let me go back to my example. I'm in a small town hall that doesn't have a local urban planning plan, so there are no rules. And now you might think great, but I say no, not great, because when there are no rules, it's chaos. Sorry to all my anarchist friends watching, I just said that as a joke. Actually, without rules, it depends on who you meet. The City Hall goes through an architect to approve the landscape integration of your project. Basically, he checks if it fits into the urban landscape around it, with the other houses. Once again, is it not ugly? As I mentioned, I wanted to build a wooden chalet-style house. Actually outside, in an environment where there are a lot of concrete houses with fairly neutral colored plaster. So it was hard to get it approved, but it's okay. Antoine made a lot of 3D renderings that you see in this video. That managed to convince them that it would look nice. Let me remind you that technically nothing stops me from building a house with wooden siding, because they don't have a local urban plan. So I could have the right, but it depends on whether the person I'm dealing with thinks it's ugly or not. Well, it's hit or miss. In my case, I was lucky, it worked out. On the other hand, I also had a flat roof on my house, and that didn't work out. So permit denied. Why? Well, because all the other houses have sloped roofs, so I have to make a sloped roof too. There's really no reason, it's not like that. Technically, it holds up better under weight, for your safety and all that. No, it's purely for looks, so that's it. So, I have to do like everyone else, make a flat roof, blend in with the others, conform, and silence myself. I'm an anarchist, damn it! I like being the annoying minority, and not following everyone else. That's not okay, I disagree. What do? I research, push, and try to make City Hall accept my flat roof. And I find out that if I submit a permit with a green roof, it's considered an ecological measure. And the City Hall doesn't have the right to refuse an ecological measure. Normally, they are required to accept a green roof. So, I resubmit my permit and it's rejected. There, that's the reason. No, but the law, it doesn't really apply to us because actually, you see, the law doesn't apply to us. So no, besides, I don't really know this law very well. Yeah, basically they told me, go screw yourself, we won't respect the law. So what did I do? I didn't let it get to me. Third permit application, I wrote in very large letters the article of the law about the permit. I kept calling and telling them, but there's a law, right? And then it went through, that's it. After 3 applications, my permits were always refused because it didn't look nice, but it finally went through. That's usually how it goes with building permits. There you go, in summary. You'll quickly notice a big difference between what's legal, allowed, possible, and what institutions typically do. You'll have to constantly negotiate and not be afraid to negotiate. Because sometimes and even often you know better than they do. It sounds very pretentious to say that, but really, they have their usual routines, but a container house is unfamiliar to them. Sometimes you know the law better than they do, so don't hesitate to negotiate, bring legal articles, and have a dialogue. By negotiate, I mean building a good relationship with them and explaining that while it's unusual, it's legal. So now we have our land, we have our building permit, and all we need now is money to build our house. So, in my case, a container house costs less than a traditional house. But I still had to take out a loan from the bank because being a YouTuber doesn't pay that well. In the end, give us money on TP, that's it. No, so yeah, loan from the bank. And I want to explain all of that to you now, in this part. But keep in mind that all the numbers I'm going to give you are either estimates from my personal case or just a rough idea. To give you an idea of how a mortgage works, the first thing I had to think about was my borrowing capacity. In other words, how much money I can borrow from the bank. For that, you should know that in France a person cannot have a debt ratio higher than 1/3 of their net salary. If I earn 1,500 euros net per month, I can't repay more than 500 euros monthly to the bank. The calculation varies with interest rates, but I'll share my example using a 1.5% annual percentage rate. When I pay back 500 euros per month, well, a little over 400 euros goes toward repaying my loan. A bit under 100 euros covers the interest, insurance, and extra fees. So my borrowing capacity is not 500 euros, it's actually 400 euros times 12 months times a maximum of 25 years. And that gives us 120,000 euros in possible loans. These calculations don't represent the reality of my loan. It's just an estimate to show you how it works. Remember to include any existing loans in this calculation. If you already owe 13% of your salary, you can only borrow another 22%. That totals 35% of your salary for all loans. The next most important thing to consider is your interest rate. Today, for a mortgage loan, interest rates range between 1 and 2%. For comparison, in the 1980s it was more like 9 or 10%, so we're doing well today. And above all, what's important to understand is that you can combine several loans with different interest rates to try to get the lowest possible average interest rate. For example, I have 4 loans. Several loans are available, including special options for young people, first-time buyers, and those with low income. So there are plenty of different offers. It will depend a bit on your banks. Not all banks offer the same deals, and sometimes it depends on the laws that are passed. So it changes all the time, so I don't have a very concrete example to give you because it keeps changing. With my 4 loans combined, I get an average rate of 1%. That's very low and cool, but it excludes insurance and extra fees. Here's how to calculate 1% of 120,000 euros. I initially believed we were finding 1% of 120,000 euros, 1,200 euros in interest. So I have to pay 1,200 euros to the bank, and the bank lends me 120,000 euros. That would be too good to be true. Maybe I was naive to think that No, it's 1% per year of the amount you still have to pay back. In the first year, you still owe 120,000 euros. You pay 1% of 120,000 euros, which is 1,200 euros. In the second year, after repaying some of your loan, you owe slightly less than 120,000. You pay just under 1,200 in interest each year, and it never changes. The less you owe, the less interest you'll pay, since it's always 1% of the remaining balance. There you go. For example, borrowing 120,000 euros over 25 years at a 1% interest rate results in 15,600 euros in interest, or 13% of the loan. Plus, you also need to add loan insurance. You'll see that it still represents a significant amount of money in case you are unable to pay it back. Work accident, illness or death, these are reasons to insure your loan. and I told you that my average rate was 1%, well, my annual percentage rate, that's the rate, the annual percentage rate, it actually combines the interest rate and the insurance rate. Well, it's 1.5%, so you see there's 1% interest rate and 0.5% for insurance. After 25 years, I'll have paid $15,600 in interest and $7,800 in insurance fees. Obviously, for insurance, the younger and healthier you are, the cheaper it will be. And vice versa. And good to know. If there are two of you taking out the loan, you'll have to get insurance for each person. You'll have to pay double the insurance price. In my case, twice the 7,800 euros. What if you're an eco-you with 10 of you borrowing? I'm not sure how that works, or if you'll all have to pay insurance 10 times. Or if there will be a group rate or something like that. Come on, let's talk about it in the comments. I'm interested. But here's what you need to know. Normally, it's one insurance policy per person, so the more people you have borrowing, the more expensive it's going to be. And you should know that when you take out your loan at the bank will often give you its own insurance at first. And it's not always the best option. Paying back 8,000, 15,000 or 20,000 in insurance can be tough, especially when competitors are sometimes 3,000 cheaper. It's worth comparing. If you didn't choose it initially, it's fine. For example, I took the one from the bank. For now, every year before the automatic renewal of the insurance contract, you can play the competition and look for who has the best rate. Now that you know about how much you can borrow, how much it will cost you to pay back, and how to negotiate the loan fees a bit, well, let's take a look at the documents the bank needs to set up your loan application. To start, to estimate your borrowing capacity, the bank will need your last 3 payslips and bank statements, as well as your last 2 tax notices. That will allow, well, first, to get an average of how much you earn, and therefore how much you can borrow. That's very theoretical, only if you have a permanent contract. It's different if you're a freelance entertainment worker like me. They'll request your last 12 months of salary, 12 bank statements, and maybe even a kidney. They ask you for a lot more things because you have a more precarious status, and in my case, additionally, I had worked in the performing arts for under 3 years, but they typically lend only to those with over 3 years experience, targeting people in more stable, long-term situations. So yeah, for me it was pretty tough, but it worked out. The second thing the bank will ask you for is quotes that match the amount you want to borrow. So, for example, if you want to borrow 120,000 euros, you'll have to provide 120,000 euros worth of quotes to prove that this is what the house will cost. And be careful, because not all banks are the same. Some banks ask for estimated quotes and others ask for final quotes. For example, me at Crédit Agricole Centre Est. They ask me for estimated quotes to calculate the loan they will give me, and then final invoices to actually release the loan. That means I can very well provide an estimated quote. From company A to buy containers for 20,000 euros, then later give them an invoice from company B for containers at 25,000 euros. They don't care. The opposite is also true. I can very well say that I'm going to buy a wood stove for 5,000 euros and in the end only buy a wood stove for 1,000 euros. I'll have 4,000 euros left from the loan for other things. In the case of a self-build, it's essential actually that your bank accepts estimated quotes, because it's just humanly impossible to have all the quotes. For everything you will have to buy, from the moment you apply for the loan, those are the final quotes. The final quotes. Your invoice has to match the quotes. In self-building, can you imagine planning for 1,000 nails, screws, and wood? Well, you can't plan for everything. So you definitely have to go through some estimated quotes. Be careful, as not all banks finance self-building. I wanted to list banks that do, but it really depends on your location. I know Crédit Agricole Centre Est funds self-building, but I'm unsure if other branches do. These are really regional specifics. But in general, the big national banks don't really finance self-building, and the more regional, local banks, like Crédit Agricole Centres, for example, which are quite local and regional, are more likely to finance self-building. One last little thing to know about banks: they'll finance all the materials for you but not the tools, so they'll finance you. They'll cover screws and sand, but not screwdrivers, sandblasters, or the costly compressor. Next video on this channel. Why do they do that? Because actually, if you can't pay back your loan, the bank will mortgage your house, sell it, and get its money back. That way, it can't really take back your tools, sell them, and get its money back. So that's why it doesn't want to finance them, because there's really no guarantee. It can't take them back and sell them. But as a result, it's still really annoying, because when you're self-building, you'll have to buy all the tools. None of your tools will be reimbursed by the bank. But that's theoretical, because in reality, you give them an invoice with many items, slip in some tools, and they might not notice. There you go, a little tip. I shouldn't say this, but bankers know it's your fault. Just check the quotes I send. But you see, there is a way to cheat, so there you go. That was the tip from Julian the cheater. The third and final thing that the banks will ask you for is the signed agreement for the purchase of the land. And the receipt for the building permit application, which in order to release the loan, will then have to become an actual building permit authorization. That seems logical. So you reach this stage, buying the land, building permit, bank loan. You kind of have the whole package. Everything I just explained to you, that was the easy part. Yes, this is where you might cry. That was the easy part. On top of that, there's a ton of paperwork to do. You have to negotiate with the banks, it's a mess. And for all that, I have to admit I cheated. Yeah, I cheated. And I'm going to share my trick with you. When I say I cheated, I really mean I got help. I paid a real estate broker. So a female broker or a male broker? It's a person who will take care of putting together your file, presenting it to different banks, and handling all the paperwork. You will still have to do everything I explained before, gather the quotes, and collect all the necessary documents. But then, the broker makes all of that easier. They organize everything for you and send it directly to the bank. There are 3 big advantages to going through a broker. She takes care of all the paperwork and she knows how to do it, so it goes quickly. Second, I'm checking my notes. Yes, she puts together a financial package from different loans, so she finds you an average interest rate with lots of loans that is the most advantageous for you. And most importantly, third point, the broker will be a bit like your lawyer who will defend your project to the banker. What's cool is she's a lawyer who's friends with the judge and knows all the bankers, men and women. So it's a bit easier when the broker is defending your project than when it's you and you're a somewhat irregular performer. What? My broker, she still cost me 2,000 euros, which is quite a sum, but she saved me a lot of time and made me money. By arranging the best financial deal for me. So, with really a lot of loans, a lot of calculations to make sure my interest rate was as low as possible. Most importantly, she negotiated my case like never before. Honestly, I don't think you realize how scary my project was for the banks. But I want to do self-construction. Yeah, that's fine. We visited Crédit Agricole. They know the concept. I wanted to build a house out of containers. I gave them renderings, plans, photos, and a PowerPoint. I explained it. Honestly, it went pretty smoothly. They didn't ask me too many questions. However, I've been a freelance entertainment worker for less than 3 years. So basically just know that I have a precarious status, like a self-employed person. I swear, 90% of the conversations we had. It was me who had to explain to the banker what a freelance entertainment worker was. And tell her no. But actually, I really do make money, it's a real job, and actually, I'm a normal person, I can pay back the loan. My broker behind me kept saying, yes, it's normal, yes. So there you go, without my broker it never would have happened. Because my project was too shaky on many points. Something was needed to reassure the bank, and that something was a broker who kind of guarantees quality. Who says if I'm handling this case, it means, don't worry, I've checked, it's legit, it can be done. You should know, however, that all brokerage fees, agency fees, bank application fees, notary fees, all the fees. A bit like that. You won't be able to include them in the loan, you'll have to pay them yourself with your own funds. That's the technical term. For my 120,000 loan, I had to contribute 8,000 of my own money. When they tell you that you need a down payment when you apply for a loan, generally, that down payment is actually to cover all those costs that aren't financed by the loan. In conclusion, buying your land, submitting your building permit, and applying for a loan at the bank It's a long, tedious and annoying process, but that's just the beginning of the challenges when you start a project like this, so hang in there. In my opinion, the right order to do all this is to first sign the preliminary contract for the land, because you'll need it to submit the building permit, then submit the building permit, because you'll need it. File at the bank, then finish with the file at the bank. Once you have everything, I'm giving you an order, as if we're doing things in sequence. But in reality, you do all three at the same time, that's it. That's because I'm trying to get into it, but it's a mess. Doing everything at once will make your head explode. It's normal. Everyone goes through this. For reference, here's how long it took me to find the land and sign the preliminary contract. It took me 2 or 3 months to get my building permit. It took me a good 5 months. Because there were still refusals, so I had to resubmit it 3 times, so about 5 months in total. And then, thanks to my broker, applying for the loan at the bank only took 2 months, and in total 1. Since things overlap, since we do everything a bit at the same time, it took me a good 6 months to complete all these administrative tasks. Honestly, I thought I would do it faster. I was a bit in a hurry. In my opinion, you won't be able to do it any faster. That's the minimum, since there's so much. You'll see when you try scheduling with the notary. He's unavailable for 2 months, the bank for 1. You haven't found land and a building permit will be refused. Actually, you need to allow at least 6 months for the paperwork. There you go. Unless you're a broker, you have friends who are bankers, and you already know which land to buy. There are ways to cheat a little, but it's pretty rare. If you can afford it, I really recommend getting help from a broker. It's a huge time saver, especially if you don't have a permanent contract. Because you'll need someone to explain that, yes. It's common not to have a permanent contract in 2022 and people still need loans, so help if you can. And for my building permit application, I was also lucky to get help from Antoine, who is an architect. Antoine, whom you've already seen on the channel, my best friend and all that, you're starting to get to know him. So he made all my plans and everything, so thanks again to him, it really helped me a lot. But if you don't have the budget to pay a broker or an architect to get help like that, it's okay. You often have services at the town hall, in local government, or even in your banks that can help you for free. So sometimes it's worth taking a bit of time to look for help, rather than wanting to do everything on your own. There are some situations where, honestly, if you don't have the skills, you end up wasting a lot of time. And I'm saying this about the administrative part in this video, but it's actually true for your whole project. I hope I answered all your questions. I hope I managed to give a fairly complete summary of all this. If you have more questions, ask in the comments and I'll answer. We'll complete everything together, this video in the comment section, just like we do for every video. I think it's a good way to practice collective intelligence. Well, I don't have much more to say. Don't forget to share this video everywhere around you so it can help everyone who will have to go through this administrative nightmare. Please share this video to save lives. See you soon. This was Julian. Bye.